Hi, everyone, and welcome to our roundtable on innovation in logistics. Before we start, I would like to present you to our participants. Avi Kramer, Global Director of Innovation, AB InBev, Brian Teaser, Vice President of Innovation, Global Supply Chain Transformation at Schneider Electric, Robert Schonhalber, Head of Innovation and Technology Supply Chain Management Continental, Aaron Geba, Director of Business Development in Brinkos, and me, Yaron Flint, the mediator, director, head of Israeli operations in Copace, the startup organization of Continental. Before I would let our participants introduce themselves, I would like to open and say that I'm glad to have this opportunity to mediate this very interesting roundtable. And with your permission, I would like to take it into a slightly different direction. Usually in these events, when we talk about logistics, we tend to focus on the day-to-day challenges and difficulties. We see people talk about the effects of COVID and the challenges of reducing costs. And logistics is just not perceived as an exciting area for innovation. In the short time we have, I would like to try and change that and focus on the exciting and future aspects of logistics. So addressing the roundtable participants, to continue from the introduction, as I see it, large organizations do not tend to see and treat logistics and supply chain as an innovation field, but rather focus on reducing costs and optimizing plans. If you could introduce yourself and elaborate on how do you address this and what is the framework that you work with startups and new technologies within your organization, that would be great. So, Brian, maybe you could start.
Sure. So first, thanks very much for having us. Very excited to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. I can tell you the model that we have is a little bit different than traditional. In April of 2016, we started a Center of Digital Innovation, we call it CODI, in the supply chain. So we have a group of people specifically focused on innovation and improvements in our end-to-end supply chain, including logistics. We find our opportunities through a bunch of different ways. One is attending events like II4. We were here for the event in the first quarter of the year and met a ton of fantastic Israeli startups that we're working with today. We also have an organization that's part of our strategy group that is the Innovation at the Edge organization, and they have regional presence. So Doron Krupman is actually the guy for Schneider who's in Israel and is responsible for animating our network with the startups. They find opportunities and then they bring them to me. I test them in our supply chain. So I've got 200 factories and 100 warehouses in 43 countries. We do the qualification of the application, take it to the floor, see how well it works. And if it works, it goes to scale in the supply chain. So kind of in a nutshell, that's how our overall innovation assessment process works. You're on mute, Yaron.
Robert?
Let me take over then. First of all, thank you, Aaron, for hosting the panel today and having me here. And warm welcome to all of you out there, wherever you are during the current situation. My name is Robert, working for Continental, and I'm located in Frankfurt, Germany. Since now 1.5 years, I'm leading the Department Innovation and Technology within automotive supply chain management. And we are constantly searching for innovative approaches, either on physical or on software side, touching the field of intralogistics. To tackle innovation within large organizations is indeed a challenging topic, as large enterprises somehow tend to be as a big tanker, but actually needs to be a speedboat, dealing with all the innovations and the speed of innovations. For this, we have established back 2017 during our reorganization of our function to a more startup-ish approach. We have on the one side, from the project management side, established a process to enable ideas and innovation to flow through our organization according to the maturity level. We call it a startup board. And this is kind of our innovation funnel, where innovations in the beginning are a high number, and during the maturity of the single projects and the single process, decreased to really meet our needs. And for this, we have developed kind of a Kanban board to track and trace and to not lose focus on the single project and the single solutions. On the other side, we have kind of a playground established. We call it a application center. And inside that, we have a dedicated area where we can simulate, where we can test our technologies and do not touching our operational processes. So this is then purely for MVPs and purely for demonstrators. And if we see the solutions and the technologies as favorable and positive, we test them and put them also into a productive mode and then define the solutions for a global standard. And this is basically how we deal innovations within an enterprise and worldwide company.
So basically, when you have an interesting startup, you can take him around and play around with it in a designated area without intervening or interfering with the large logistics area.
Exactly, it's kind of a copy of our warehouse, for example, and it's a dedicated area of 200 square meters where we can then just set up an driverless guided vehicle or a software-based algorithm to test, to link to the single data sets. So this is kind of a playground for elder people or for us to deal with the technologies, to get fast insights and to identify the possibilities with the technologies.
Interesting. Avi?
Yes. Okay. First of all, thanks, Yaron, for inviting me. You're, you're doing an amazing job in this ecosystem, and I'm always happy to collaborate. And obviously, thanks to Startup Nation Central and Grow Ventures for organizing this event and being such a great partner for ABI. So a little bit about myself. My name is Avi Kramer. I'm the Global Director of Innovation at ABI. A few words about the company, because some might know the beers, but not the company itself. So we're the largest beer company in the world. With about 180,000 colleagues across the globe. We're operating in 190 countries, and most importantly, we brew amazing beers. We have more than 500 brands, such as Stella Artois, Corona, Budweiser, Leffe, Hoegaarden, Brahma, wherever you are in the world. A little bit about myself. So I joined the company in 2016 in our global headquarters in New York, spent 3 years there. And then after 3 years, I basically kind of convinced our leadership so we can actually establish a tech innovation hub in Israel. So about a year ago, I moved back home. And since then, we're kind of building the hub and keep expanding in terms of collaborations that we have and value that we're generating, et cetera. In terms of the structure and the process, so we have different tech innovation teams across the world. So we have now here one in Israel, mine. We actually call ourselves the Beer Garage, so it's a nice name. And we also have a hub in Silicon Valley, a hub in India. And we do have different programs, such as Levadura de Ideas in Mexico, which acts more as a corporate accelerator, a tech incubator, and some others. The process for us is, I know it's not very sexy in the tech innovation world to talk about process and structure, but in my opinion, it's a must-have. So we make sure that we are very, very well aligned with the different functions within our company. So if we're talking to a logistics company, we understand, first of all, what is the problem statement. So very clearly define it. What is the challenge? What is the opportunity that we're trying to address? Then we align with the right stakeholder champion to make sure that, we have a person to rely on to kind of test out the different technologies. Then it's basically the, show me the money phase, where we're trying to see what is the business case, okay? What can we actually generate by solving that problem or generating that opportunity? Are we saving money? Is it a top-line opportunity? Are we contributing to our 2025 sustainability goals? But it has to be well-defined. Then we kind of, on our own, our teams in the different hubs, we do our part in terms of kind of sourcing the different technologies, the different partners, and then we pilot together with our counterparts in the business, in the function. And last but not least, which is super important for us, is the scale-up phase. For us, the real impact comes in scale. It doesn't matter if we run a really successful logistics project in Dominican Republic. It would be really interesting if we actually applied across the world, across our hundreds of distribution centers that we have. So together, we actually work on the KPIs and the success criteria and the rollout plan, assuming there's a successful pilot. And for us, we see it as a win-win situation for ourselves and also for the partner, where we can actually work along the way very closely together in a transparent way with a startup, for example, to make sure that we reach this mutual goal.
Interesting. And you do that all by drinking beer. So that's great.
Yes.
I would maybe before I jump in and give you the lead, I think what we do, Avi, is very, very similar to your approach. So therefore, I'd like to address that at this point and explain a little bit of how we do that in Continental. So Continental is one of the largest tier ones in automotive in the world, a company of more than 250,000 people across 600 manufacturing plants in 60 countries, very large operation, German-based, and basically it's very, very difficult or challenging to bring innovation to this large organization. And therefore, we established this group called CoPace, which is the startup and innovation arm of the group. We basically work very, very closely with the business units and understand the future roadmap and the soul points. And I love the fact that you said you're coming from a real need and finding, the right technology that will fit that, because that's the most easiest way, or I would say simplest way to start from. And this is what we try to do. We try to understand the needs of the business units and try to find the right technology and address that. And we have our own legal and procurement framework to do so, and budgets. So we are basically seeing ourselves as enablers, listening to the business unit and working together with them to find and formulate the right partnership and relationship with startups that we see of interest to the organization. Aaron, as a representative of the startups, how do you see working with large organizations like us, and how do you overcome the innovation or lack of innovation thinking in such organizations?
So first of all, depends which organization. But first of all, thank you very much for the event. And first of all, I want to say thank you to all of the corporate innovation scouts for doing a tremendous job in the local ecosystem. So look, basically for us, I think for a startup approaching a very large corporate, the number of phases. So first of all, you need to come well-versed, very well-learned. You need to understand what the business does, what are the various business lines, what are the challenges, what's happening in terms of the competition, what are the industry benchmarks as well. Once you do that, you have to really identify the actual champion within the organization. Typically, if it's an Israeli startup, quite often that process would start within Israel, with a contact within the innovation ecosystem that would actually take you to some operational unit. Once you realize that, once you go through that process, it's very important to understand who's the actual winner of the process, whose KPIs are the most important that's trying to drive that process. And there you have to really connect. And I think really when approaching very large organizations, the number of pitches that you need to come across. So first of all, you need to understand who actually has the agenda and who's trying to push forward the agenda. The question is it a push versus a pull situation? So quite often, if we come across organizations and identify a number of issues, so the number of approaches. So first of all, there'll be the operational innovation approach of how do we work across that, really the bottom line revenue. How do we work on the margins? And across that could be streamlining operations and reducing costs and expenditures. That'll be one way of really approaching an organization. And the second one would be actually through commercial innovation. How can we actually impact growth initiatives within those organizations? And quite often that would stem, from our case, through really reducing assets and really freeing up more assets to other growth initiatives as well. These are a number of occasions, but at the end of the day, it's really a matter of coming well-versed, knowing very well who is the organization, what the use cases are, identifying the agendas, and trying to push forward with the help quite often of a local scout. So that would be at a very high level.
I think, when we talk a lot about logistics, and like I said, we very tend to focus a lot about cost reduction and optimization, but there's a lot of things to talk beyond that. And I think innovation in logistics can enable us to go much wider and much brighter in the organizations. And I would like to address that and hear a little bit about your experience and what kind of solutions would you try to promote, and how is your thinking about promoting them to enrich or take the organization just beyond cost reduction. Who wants to take this first? Robert, maybe you?
I can take this. Well, yeah, as mentioned, innovation and technologies are indeed in the first step focusing on operational costs. But nevertheless, this is not the only driver we see. We are looking constantly for solution which allows our workers doing, at the end, higher value tasks, to get rid of non-value add tasks, to focus on the critical and on the important steps. This is also beside the cost fact. As you imagine, or I would take you to a kind of an imagination trip. As I see within logistics, we still have a huge potential in front of us. If you compare an average production from the 50s, where you see single worker places and next to each other, and compare this to our modern production facility, where we have a complete production flow and a complete production line, there has been a huge progress in the technology itself, and also in the thinking. And in logistics, if you compare a standard pallet warehouse of the 50s, where you maybe see a black and white picture, and transfer this to nowadays, the development has not been with that pace as it was in the production, and there is still a huge potential as the picture maybe just turned into color, but with the same technology or the same processes behind. So this is what we are focusing on, and through, at the end, digitalization, we create data. We create data sets on spots which are not yet touched, which are still some white spots. And through these insights and through these processes, we enlight, at the end, the warehouse, and can really start to run algorithms on it, to run technologies on it, to further enhance insights on those data, to stabilize also our processes and the systems, which helps, at the end, also our day-to-day processes and our day-to-day business.
Interesting. Brian?
So for us, obviously, the cost reduction is a big deal. And we have many programs specifically that have that as a result. But in addition, the KPIs that make the logistics and transportation function go forward, we try new things in order to improve on those other operational axes as well. So things like safety. We see that the explosion of technology, as far as democratization of like AI, this has been a year that I've been very surprised how many offers have come down that, for example, make extremely high quality AI for vision systems, for personnel detection, for managing the movement of man, machine, and material around a facility. I'm going to pimp one of my favorite Israeli startups. You guys, if you haven't heard of them, is a company called Inspecto. So, they have really this all-in-one, super simple AI system that allows us to actually add vision and quality control to places that it was never feasible before in the past because of the complexity of actually doing that. We're also looking for ways to streamline and improve from a sustainability standpoint. So working with another startup that has specific automation that when it creates packages to actually minimize the amount of white space, the empty space in the boxes. So you get a box that's the exact right size for what it is that's going out the door. And we're not doing what you see sometimes when you get something from our friends at Amazon and it comes in a huge box and it's this little thing sitting in the bottom. We're all chasing that as something that we're trying to improve as well, because not only is it a cost reduction, it's also a major driver for us in regards to improving our sustainability. within the business. So a couple things going on there. I'll talk more about some of the other startups that we're working with, but really we have an innovation forward approach. Obviously, we want to solve business issues, but at the same time, what's really cool about where we're set up today is the business understands sometimes you need to examine technologies before they're even vaguely ready for prime time. So that, for example, like smart dust and the ability to embed those nanomaterials with different capabilities, it's not ready to go out onto a product, but we need to understand what the boundaries of the solution are so that we can make informed decision as we evaluate some more technologies moving forward.
Before we move to other participants, Robert, do you want to reciprocate? Because you've been working with Israeli startups as well. So what are the interesting ones you've been seeing?
Yeah, thank you for readdressing that question. Yeah, well, just now we are in a close contact with, for example, Bionic Hive, dealing in the warehouse on working on HEVs to really pick a single parcel out of the shelf, which allows a different handling at the end in the warehouse and on the shop floor at the end.
Yeah, if you don't know Bionic Hive, look them up because their solution is called the Squid. It's an AGV that can climb the racks in your warehouse and extract parts. Yeah. So 3-dimensional AGV is pretty awesome.
Nothing to add to that statement.
I think it solves more than one problem within the warehouse.
Yeah, and another topic which I will come later on also is touching also, or another startup is touching localization. We have one strategic project ongoing for localizing of our assets, and here we are in contact with Wiliot or Will IoT. They have a Bluetooth tech at the end, which does not need a battery. They are harvesting energy out of the air or with the given radiation, and this is also great step forward.
Avi?
Yes. So first of all, great question. I would say we have different types of projects that we're running with our logistics team. So one is, top line revenue generating project. Another one is mostly focused on cost savings, but still could have an element of top line. And then there's also projects related to our sustainability goals or important causes that we're working on that actually impact the societies where we operate, right? Because beer is a very, very local business. So I'll try to give an example for each one of those types. So let's talk about, top line revenue generating. As one of the largest CPGs in the world, we have a lot of assets such as, our trucks and our warehouses and our know-how how to operate them. So now we're trying to go into this approach of saying, how can we actually leverage our assets and maybe, offer them to other partners, so we can actually use some of our empty miles that goes on our trucks or our empty space in our warehouses. Or also the other way around, how can we maybe share it, access others in order to kind of fulfill our own demand. So that's one example for a top line generating project. Another example would be a project which is, on the get-go sounds very cost reduction. So around our fleet maintenance, how can we maintain our trucks and, avoid breakages and things like that. So it sounds very, we need to save money so we don't pay a lot for the truck that eventually will go bust. But when you look at a little bit deeper, and when we talk to our stakeholders, they're saying, no, actually, there's a top line element for it because we can actually increase or improve our service levels. Once we do that, it results with with our customers being happier and they will order more beer. Okay, so there's also this element of top line in such a project even. And then another kind of example that will be interesting is our 2025 sustainability goals. One of them is 25% reduction in our CO2 emissions. So we're trying to see how do we optimize our transportation in a way that effectively positively affects our carbon footprint. So for example, using AI and analytics for route optimization or working with partners on zero emission beer delivery. We had a big press release in the US that Anheuser-Busch delivered the first Budweisers without any emission of CO2. And another example that, kind of impact our societies is we're actually partnering with other players such as UPS and PepsiCo in a program called Together for Safer Roads. It's a nonprofit organization that we kind of build together. And there we're also kind of trying to use technology to understand what is the truck of the future and how can we help drivers and avoid collisions and things like that. So this is also really impacts our societies. So I think this is a range of examples that, that in our case at least prove that logistics is not only cost-cutting tech innovation initiatives.
Aaron, addressing your solution as at Bringbo's, which is kind of the main core as a route optimization, which goes directly into saving costs and optimization of supply chain management. But I'm quite sure you're thinking beyond that. If you can address that from your point of view and how you see it.
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for the interesting insights. So I'll give you an example. We've been working with some very large, some massive automotive distributors. And by actually cutting down on their costs and the size of their fleet and reducing the kilometers traveled on road, they were actually able to divert resources into growth, into actually growing the operations and extending it to additional areas as well. Such as selling vehicle parts online as well. That's something that they weren't able to do beforehand. Utilizing the workforce in additional ways as well. So we've actually been seeing them increasing dramatically the revenue and also increasing the customer satisfaction. They're getting faster to customers. They're having more drop-offs per route, which is amazing. And because B2B customers, not only B2C customers, are looking to receive the goods and services and equipment in a very fast SLA, they're happier. So it's a higher stickiness, and also could also increase the switching costs as well as you move forward.
Interesting. Okay, so we talked a lot about what kind of solutions you're looking for. How are you facing these solutions? What are the challenges you see in the future for logistics and worldwide, and how do you see your organization cope with that? Robert, maybe you can start.
Yes. Well, as mentioned before, we are talking about digitalization in every, at the end, micrometer of our shop floor, of our warehouse, and at the end of the logistics processes. In most of the times, every physical solution comes with an own infrastructure and an own data structure or an control software, brain platform, however you could call it. Although we are talking about IoT and cloud solutions, nevertheless, those are kind of standalone or autark system. What we see as a big challenge is, for example, also in localizations. As mentioned before, we have one project ongoing for identifying pallets, boxes in the shop floor, specifically on a centimeter accuracy, or in an less two decimal centimeter accuracy. And here we're talking about ultra wideband with one specific localization technology. But there is RFID, there is Bluetooth, as mentioned, there is Wi-Fi localization, there is LoRaWAN, or in future maybe also 5G. And all those technologies come with an own set, own infrastructure, or an own environment. And this we need to tackle. We cannot afford to have in future several systems available. We need to have an independent solution at the end using standard communication technologies. Take, for example, today's Wi-Fi. Every asset can communicate with every router. So it does not need to be a cell phone or a laptop or notebook from a supplier A to connect to a router from supplier A, but it could be supplier B, C, D, whatever. And there's an avoidance of vendor lock-in for those situations. And this we need to tackle for specific use cases, for specific technologies like the localization, but to have the broader mind in place. And maybe also then to act more kind of an as a service approach, that you offer the technologies and then deal at the end with as a service approach. But for specifically for this localization, we want to avoid a vendor lock-in and want to broader picture, as this speed up all our projects and would enable much more use cases than just pure location-based services, but also then to connect to tier 2 to tier 3, or also to the OEMs, and to use the same asset, to the same hardware, and to connect the single data spots.
I think one element you touched, and this is very, very important. One crucial element and challenge is, how do you connect the inbound, outbound, and interlogistics all together with one solution, and address that with one platform, and not have this 3 layers that need to connect to each other and complicate the entire thing. I think, Aaron, maybe you can address this as offering a platform to companies. How do you see this as a challenge, and how are you trying to solve this?
So first of all, thank you very much. So currently, I very much agree with Robert. We were working with very large manufacturing organizations, and there they really have highly fragmented environment, both in terms of solutions and in terms of workforce as well that they're working with. So when you're looking at inbound logistics, they'll be working with a multitude of suppliers that are coming to the manufacturing sites, and each and every supplier is working with a different transportation system. And they're notified at different times, and not getting on time to manufacturing site translates into downtime in terms of manufacturing. So there's specifically, the ability to work, the ability for the manufacturing site to ask or to require those suppliers to use a single solution to drive transportation, I think would have an immense effect for that manufacturing party. There's intralogistics as well. Working with a very diverse and fragmented workforce between the various organizational hubs as well. There's an important for highly important to have one single point of access for entire organization in terms of communication. And the same goes out also for outbound, of getting on time to customer sites as well. So we've been able a number of times to connect between, it could be the first mile, the access point in terms of organization as they exit outwards. There being between the internal hubs as well. So there's also, I think, currently one of the largest challenges is actually the inbound. It's really, connecting these various third parties and these various suppliers that are on their way to the manufacturing sites. And that could only be done, as I mentioned, through the manufacturing party actually requiring these parties to use one single solution currently.
Brian?
So challenges for us, I would say that the march of customer expectations continues no matter what. Both B2B and B2C, everybody expects you to be able to operate like Amazon. And I work for a 200-year-old French industrial. I, have a substantially complicated back office when compared to some startups that kind of are the A/B sample that our customers are comparing us to. So I think that the ability to continue to take ground on service level, speed, agility, cost, and really satisfy that Amazon delivery expectation is a big deal. And, for us, we also have a very substantial install base. So our services supply chain for spare parts is absolutely massive. So, looking at technologies to really kind of cut the cord a little bit and allow us to produce closer. So, additive has been a big investment for me this year, trying to find different ways to control the intellectual property of formerly injection molded parts that we send to our customers for repair, and either printing them through service bureaus or having printers on site for the customers to actually print their own spare parts. Those are some of the things that we're trying to do, because we're trying to disaggregate some of the overall value chain in these things And it helps us with, sustainability, service level with the customers, costs, and all of the above. So, I think that we are all trying to live in a world that Amazon's created. It's going to keep the platform burning for a substantial period of time. And to me, I find it exciting because this is another one of those things, kind of like COVID, capitalize on the needs of the market and use it to get lift for all these big digitization and digitalization projects that we're trying to work our way through.
I'd like to enlarge a little bit or elaborate on one of the things you talked about, which is sustainability. And I see it one of the major difficulties or crucial elements in the next years to come would be the environmental aspect. There is a lot of expectations towards logistics to become more sustainable and environmental friendly. It's not something new, but I think the solutions are not there yet. And the challenge here would be to find a very wide range of different solutions and innovation that will allow all our organizations to be more green and more friendly to the environment. Things from dissolvable package elements and being more circular economy and things like that. And this would be definitely something for the future to come to focus on.
Totally agree to that, Yaron. If I just able to jump in, so
yeah, sure.
CO2 or reduction of CO2 is not a single product question, but it's a complete process question. We need to think and to rethink all our processes through the complete supply chain, through the complete process, to really question and to optimize that point.
I think one other big challenge, a lot of us are using third parties. How do you bring them? I would say, if you want to go in the route of innovation, how do you convince them to go in the same path? If you want to use a new platform, how do you convince them to take the same approach? This is kind of, I would say, very, very challenging in the aspects of large organizations. And Aaron, I believe you're facing that on a daily basis. How do you see this?
So I think the number of ways that the businesses work with third parties. The first being telling them you're only going to get paid if you're going to work with a certain system as part of a contract. That's one way of that's the stick, and there's the carrot, and the carrot could quite often be, this is a solution it's going to help you streamline your operations. It'll help your drivers get faster, and it'll help you engage with your drivers and your other workforce as well. At the end of the day, drivers are it's an interesting population. It's not always that easy to work with, and providing them a solution that'll be easy to communicate between them and the various parties in HQ as well would be very much welcomed by a lot of organizations that quite often are just using very old legacy solutions that are just quite often inappropriate for day-to-day local distribution. That's what we've been seeing.
And this fits also to a question in the chat from Dara, as she was stating the huge or complicated organizational effort behind dealing with the third parties to create one platform. But this is basically it. It is a huge effort to show up the benefit of those solutions, or also of those ways we need to go. And we can use associations like the German VDA to bring that topic up, to discuss it also with the VDA and to define a market standard. Or we really need to get in contact left and right to build up kind of connections vertically and horizontally to come together and to build a common standard, which can then be used for the solutions. But it is indeed a huge effort to align with all the stakeholders involved in that process.
Okay, before we close this session, and unfortunately we're reaching to an end because this has been extremely interesting, at least at my end, I'd like to each and every one of you to talk about one solution they're working on that would not be the common thing that our audience would think about. Something that would surprise them and take this to a different approach of what you're working with. Brian, would you like to start?
So I have a couple things. I can tell you that one thing that would be surprising is we are actually doing a fair number of convergence projects between multiple startups. So we talked a little bit earlier about Inspecto and their autonomous AI QA system, but I'm also combining that with a collaborative roadmap from a startup in China called XARM that actually allows me to move the camera all the way around a part or a product in order to get 100% inspection in a very inexpensive way. So, you know, for me, all of these things becoming far less expensive. Inspecto is roughly a $10,000 US investment. And this robot that I'm using is a 7 degree of freedom robot that costs only $7,000. So convergence, bringing these lower costs, high need type technologies together and being able to deploy something that solves the business problem by combining them, I think has been surprising this year for a lot of folks.
Avi?
Sure. So one kind of project that is kind of dear is in my heart is around the safety issues that Brian has mentioned before. So we've been piloting a tech solution around using AI and computer vision to detect, you know, dangerous behavior within our warehouses, or, you know, that our employees are actually wearing the PPEs as they should. And on top of that, kind of the interesting point is that we were able to use the same technology to actually also apply to productivity within our warehouses in terms of the way that we pick things, the way we load our trucks. So for me, this is a dear project to my heart that has kind of two different objectives.
Robert?
Yeah, I took the time to think about that question. As there's not the only one solution which I would to highlight, but as we have several in the pipeline which are fancy and which we could use, taking for example also identifying light or the ceiling to localize. But what maybe brings a totally different aspect is when we talk about innovation, we mostly think of getting data, enabling data, or physical solutions. What we currently deep dive into is robot process automation. So to enable automation, to enable robot process in the admin area. We started also during now the COVID situation to deep dive in end of April into that topic. And since now we have several use cases live, serving more than 1,000 users or employees worldwide for getting rid of manual repetitive tasks, to give the planners more time to really solving issues and not just stupidly copying one information to the other every day at the same time. So with a standard workflow, with robot process automation, we enable here them the time to really solve the topics and perform then the solutions at the end.
Okay, Aaron?
Hi. So actually, for us, I mean, we've developed a distribution management solution. So I think for us, it's been surprising a number of things. So first of all, I think it's really COVID related. For us, it's all really been COVID related. A lot of businesses out there have suddenly gone through this really amazing understanding and need that they have to accelerate and adopt new technologies to really streamline the operations. And that translates into really a boom of businesses out there, regardless of industry and geography and business size as well, that we've been approached by. The second has been really businesses that, were, this might be less exciting as the other colleagues here, is that, businesses that were actually managed to really fortify themselves with a good technology to manage distribution prior to the outbreak. We're actually in the end really able to handle the workload, the immense workload that they've seen. But it's really, overwhelmingly, the need for a solution to automate distribution, it's really been overwhelming, the great demand for that.
Maybe I would share last. One of the most interesting solutions that I've been seeing is excavators, which is kind of robotic frameworks that you go around workers in order to manage or keep the workers' health and help them with hard labor. So specifically for us, when we're producing large tires, which could be very, very, very big, one or even two guys lifting them can really, really hurt your back. So utilization of exoskeletons in order to enable a much smoother and reduce the amount of back injuries is something very, very interesting we're experimenting with. I think we have time for one or two questions from the audience, if anyone wants to address that.
So if we don't have a question, Yaron, the one that I would throw up is, how big of an impact do the folks on the phone think 5G will have in enabling your operations?
Who wants to address that first? Please.
I can take that. It's a complicated question, as 5G is maybe one of the next big things, as Dara is also asking in the chat. We see a huge potential on the operational side, but also a huge wave from a cost side, from the initiation like, for example, a campus network needs to be established. And then to identify the right use cases to test the environment. But it could be that with the latency and the improvement in the latency of the solution, we get new insights that we have, for example, a forklift driver, not attached to a forklift, but maybe sitting in a dedicated office, in a decentralized office, and touching then or attaching then to the single device, grabbing one of the pallets or the goods up in the fourth or fifth floor, where a standard HGV cannot deal in that way or in that speed as a normal worker can do. And maybe it is in front of us also for localization, but for communicating, if we get the cost topic somehow covered.
Aaron, do you want to address that? 5G?
5G, I think less so at this point. I think, it's will be, it's always a matter of communication and drivers are able to communicate and other field workforce communicating appropriately, between them, customers, and HQ as well. So I think that will have an immense effect. We'll find, on-time distribution and delivery, keeping to SLA. So I think overall, in terms of both distribution side and the manufacturing side, that would also be immense effect overall.
Mm-hmm. As for me, answering Dara's question, one of the next big things that I'm at least witnessing is solutions of voice to text and text to voice that go across different cultures and languages. That's a really, really cool thing that we started experimenting with. How do you create a common understanding in language between people who are working in China and Germany and Japan, specifically in large organizations that work across multiple cultures? So that for me would be, I would say, the next big thing that I would be addressing.
Interesting point, Yaron. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
So if no one else has any question or remark, I think we will wrap it up at this point. So last chance, guys? No? Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us. I think it's been a really, really interesting session, taking you to a little of a different approach towards logistics, seeing the innovation and aspects and seeing that a lot of new and exciting solutions could be fitted in this area, which has kind of been neglected in I would say, in the industry 4.0 and in the last years. I'd like to see more and more innovation around that. So thank you all the participants, and thanks Startup Nation Central for setting it up, and looking forward for the rest of the days at the events.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much and have a nice time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.